DeMarcus had spent years saving diligently for the house of his dreams. He wanted a home that reflected everything he had worked so hard to achieve. After countless late nights and weekends juggling multiple jobs, he finally purchased a beautiful property situated in an exclusive neighborhood. The highlight of this property was the shimmering private pool in the backyard, a luxury that wasn't just about relaxation, but also a personal symbol of triumph. From the moment he moved in, DeMarcus noticed that his new street was quiet and well-maintained. However, it quickly became clear that the neighborhood's civility was somewhat superficial. People waved politely if they saw him watering the lawn or walking to the mailbox, but otherwise kept a noticeable distance. DeMarcus had grown accustomed to subtle wariness from certain neighbors throughout his life, so this aloof politeness did not completely surprise him. Still, he hoped that over time, he would blend into the community and make a few friends. Unfortunately, he soon discovered that not everyone wanted a cordial relationship. His neighbor Karen lived 2 houses down. Their interactions began with nonverbal signals. She avoided meeting his gaze when retrieving her mail, and he sensed a definite chill anytime their paths crossed on the sidewalk. While he found it odd, he tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, imagining she might be shy or simply not very neighborly. Then, an incident happened that changed his perspective entirely. On a sunny morning at the start of summer, DeMarcus glanced out his kitchen window and was stunned to see Karen relaxing on a colorful pool float in his backyard. She was wearing large sunglasses and looked as though she had every right to be there. Shocked, DeMarcus went out and politely informed her that the pool was part of his private property. Karen did not even remove her sunglasses when responding. She waved a dismissive hand and told him not to worry so much. "It's just a pool," she said. "We're neighbors, so why make a big deal out of it?" Surprised by her boldness, DeMarcus hesitated but kept his composure. He calmly explained that while he understood the appeal of a pool during hot summer months, she needed his permission to enter. Karen rolled her eyes. Rather than argue further, DeMarcus decided to let the matter go for the moment, hoping she would respect his boundary in the future. However, over the next few weeks, Karen returned again and again. Sometimes DeMarcus would look outside and see her dipping her toes in the water. Other times he noticed her and a couple of her friends splashing around as if the pool were a public amenity. Each time he politely asked her to leave, reminding her she was trespassing. Karen's responses grew more condescending. She insisted that the entire neighborhood had been built for the community, and that since DeMarcus could afford such a house, it was only right she have access to the pool. DeMarcus began to realize that her objections were more than simple entitlement. Her tone suggested that, in her mind, his success was somehow a mistake. He suspected her attitude was driven by something deeper, an ingrained sense of superiority that refused to acknowledge a black homeowner's right to own a high-value property. After several attempts at a cordial solution, DeMarcus decided enough was enough. He installed a robust lock on the backyard gate and put up private property and no trespassing signs. To bolster his sense of security, he also placed surveillance cameras around the perimeter of the house. Despite the expense, he felt it was necessary. The sense of relief he experienced in the days following was tangible. No more unexpected pool visitors, and no sign of Karen lurking around. That peace lasted a mere 48 hours. Late on the 3rd afternoon, as DeMarcus worked in his home office, he heard a harsh clanging from the backyard. He checked the live feed on his phone and saw Karen violently shaking the locked gate, her face twisted in anger. She seemed to be talking to herself, but every now and then, he caught phrases like, "unbelievable," and "how dare he." A few minutes later, a shrill wail of sirens announced the arrival of police. DeMarcus immediately suspected Karen had called them, and his hunch proved correct when 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their patrol car. Karen rushed over, feigning desperation. She claimed that DeMarcus had threatened her and locked her out for no reason. Keeping his hands visible, DeMarcus went outside to greet the officers. One of them relayed Karen's accusation, cautious yet professional. DeMarcus calmly stated he had not spoken to her that day. He pointed out the security cameras and produced footage on his phone showing Karen rattling the gate, clearly trespassing on his property. The officers watched in silence, then looked at Karen with undisguised disapproval. One informed her she had no right to enter private property. If she attempted to do so again, they would arrest her for trespassing. Karen's face turned a livid shade of red. She spluttered about DeMarcus being unfair and locking her out on purpose, but the officers remained unmoved. They repeated their warning before departing, leaving Karen to stomp away in fury. DeMarcus realized this altercation was not likely the end. Karen seemed like the kind of person who would not rest until she regained some sense of perceived control. Her hostility was alarming, but his options were limited. He considered legal avenues, restraining orders, civil lawsuits, but decided to wait and see if she would back off. Instead, in the following days, he caught her glaring at him from her porch or muttering to herself when he walked by. It was a clear sign that she was not done trying to make his life miserable. Knowing he had to protect himself, DeMarcus began digging into Karen's background. He started with basic public records, learning general information about her property taxes, local complaints, and minor citations for code violations. Nothing stood out at first. However, deeper research uncovered an unsettling pattern. Her grandparents and great-grandparents had been major figures in a local branch of the KKK. There were old newspaper clippings, photographs of them in robes, and mention of their involvement in violent, racially motivated events. Karen's parents also appeared to have engaged in racist activism. Discovering these details made DeMarcus feel sick. He had grown up hearing about such families, but never thought he'd encounter such prejudice in the present day. Karen's unyielding sense of entitlement began to make even more sense. She had inherited a belief system that told her people like DeMarcus did not deserve success. Instead of letting anger consume him, DeMarcus formed a plan. Perhaps, he reasoned, Karen had never faced true consequences. It was time for her to learn that certain actions would not be tolerated. DeMarcus reached out to a local journalist, known for investigating stories of racial discrimination. He shared his evidence of her trespassing, the false police report, and the old records exposing her family's KKK ties. The journalist, eager for a poignant story, asked a series of questions, then put together a thorough exposé. Within a day, the story was published online. The headline named Karen outright, detailing her harassment and her ancestors' grim history. The piece went viral, circulating through social media with astonishing speed. Predictably, Karen boiled with rage. One afternoon, while DeMarcus was watering the lawn, she marched up his driveway, jabbing her phone in his face. She accused him of ruining her life and insisted that everything published was a lie. DeMarcus kept his composure, telling her that her own behavior had drawn attention to these facts. She grew even more furious and lunged at him. Before she could reach him, red and blue lights once again lit the street. Police had arrived in response to online complaints about threats Karen had been posting ever since the exposé went live. In a moment of panic, Karen tried to flee. Her escape attempt lasted only seconds before she tripped on the curb, falling flat. The officers surrounded her, handcuffing her for making false statements and attempting an assault. DeMarcus watched the scene in silence, feeling both relief and lingering disbelief that her behavior had escalated so fast. Once in custody, Karen continued her angry tirades. Her case moved to trial due to the severity of her false reports, her history of trespassing, and her threatening behavior. Word had already spread about the situation, and many local residents wanted to see how justice would be served. Inside a cramped and tense courtroom, Karen appeared in front of Judge Harris, an imposing figure who carried himself with calm authority. The irony that the judge was black did not escape onlookers who were aware of Karen's bigoted history. Karen's lawyer tried to coach her into displaying remorse, but it soon became apparent she lacked any. The prosecutor presented the security footage, Karen trespassing by the pool and violently shaking the locked gate. More damning still were her vile social media posts, openly threatening DeMarcus and whoever tried to ruin her reputation. Witnesses took the stand, including some neighbors and DeMarcus himself. They recounted how Karen had repeatedly entered DeMarcus's property without permission, made false 911 calls, and glared at him with obvious hostility. The prosecutor also submitted the exposé that unveiled her family's legacy of racial hatred, suggesting her actions were motivated by deeply ingrained biases. Judge Harris remained stoic, listening intently. Then came the moment for Karen to speak on her own behalf. Instead of offering an apology, she launched into a furious outburst. She labeled the proceedings a setup and called DeMarcus a thug. The gallery erupted in gasps and murmurs. Karen was visibly shaking, her rage overshadowing any defense her lawyer might have prepared. The judge calmly asked her to refrain from further insults and bigoted language, warning that such conduct could lead to harsher sentencing. Karen did not heed the warning. She pointed a trembling finger at the judge, spewing more venomous remarks, questioning his credentials, and proclaiming the entire court was biased. That proved to be the final straw. The judge formally declared her in contempt and ordered her to be removed from the courtroom. She was sentenced to a year in jail for trespassing, filing false police reports, and threatening a judge. News of Karen's courtroom meltdown spread quickly. Video snippets of her rant circulated on social media, further humiliating her in the public eye. Memes mocked her arrogance, highlighting her collapse from entitled neighbor to convicted criminal. The scandal drew attention to the deep-seated racism in certain communities, prompting necessary conversations about how such hatred can linger in supposedly upscale neighborhoods. Meanwhile, DeMarcus was free at last to enjoy his home in the way he had always intended. His neighbors, previously distant or neutral, began showing support. A few, embarrassed by how Karen had tainted the atmosphere, organized a small gathering around DeMarcus's pool. They brought food, drinks, and friendly conversation, acknowledging that they stood with him against bigotry. Standing by the water, DeMarcus looked out at the group assembled in his yard, people who had chosen to celebrate unity rather than division. He felt a profound sense of relief, tinged with pride. He had bought this house because he wanted a tranquil space that represented his achievements. For weeks, Karen's intrusions and hateful behavior robbed him of peace. Yet her downfall became a stark reminder that cruelty does not go unpunished. DeMarcus's story became something of a local legend. After her sentencing, Karen spent her days in jail with no chance of an easy release. Her past misdeeds had finally caught up with her, and in a way that she could not ignore or dismiss. She had tried to weaponize law enforcement and the legal system against DeMarcus, believing he did not deserve to set boundaries around his own property. But instead of succeeding, she wound up exposing the entire neighborhood, and beyond, to her generational malice. Some residents whispered among themselves about how surreal it was to witness Karen's swift downfall. A few admitted they had once feared speaking out against her or intervening in any dispute because she seemed so brazen. Now that she was gone, the street felt quieter, almost lighter in spirit. Parents felt more comfortable letting their children ride bikes along the sidewalks, and DeMarcus no longer jumped at the sound of sirens in the distance. Occasionally, reporters covering the broader issue of racism and entitlement in suburban areas reached out to DeMarcus. While he was grateful for their concern, he also wanted to move forward. He gave a few brief statements about the importance of calling out prejudice rather than ignoring it. He stressed that sometimes those who harass others are fueled by a belief that no one will fight back. Exposing Karen's actions served as a perfect example of how bringing the truth to light can neutralize even the most toxic individuals. Beyond the newfound tranquility, DeMarcus felt a deeper appreciation for the life he had built. The pool, once an emblem of his personal success, had become a symbol for so much more. It was a gathering place where his true friends and supportive neighbors could enjoy each other's company. It reminded him that, despite hardship, justice had been served. Karen no longer lurked by the fence, plotting ways to claim what was not hers. In the end, Karen faced the consequences she had avoided for so long. Her deeply rooted hate, once tolerated in the shadows of her life, was dragged into the open for everyone to see and reject. She learned in the starkest way possible that the rules she thought she was above applied to her as well. By the time she stepped into that jail cell, she had lost her veneer of superiority. Meanwhile, DeMarcus reclaimed his peace, secure in the knowledge that he had done everything within his power to handle the situation responsibly. He had used technology, legal channels, and the press when necessary, showing patience and courage in the face of persistent harassment. His ultimate reward was the freedom to enjoy the comfort of his home, at last, without fear of someone hopping the fence or dialing 911 to enact twisted vendettas. In the weeks following Karen's sentencing, DeMarcus sometimes thought about how easily life could have gone differently if he had responded to her confrontations with anger or violence. Yet he had chosen a path that relied on evidence, patience, and shining a spotlight on the truth. In the process, he forged stronger bonds with his other neighbors, transforming his residence into a true home, one built not just on a foundation of hard work, but also on a sense of unity and fairness that Karen's hatred could never destroy. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more stories and tell us about any interactions you had. I would love to hear.